heard you wanted to talk about some street epistemology stuff and healing.
I wasn't sure what the format of the thing was going to be here, because I know it's supposed to be the street epistemology show, so I wasn't sure if you were going to be asking me questions or what. But
potentially. Well, it depends on what you have to bring to us. Well,
so I'm an atheist, and I guess one topic I could bring up might be an experience that I've had around, I guess it sort of involves faith healing, but it more gets into baggage from my former Christianity, I guess.
Okay.
You might say.
Sure.
When I was still a Christian, and this goes back probably 13-ish years ago now, I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. I was a larger lad then than I am now. Yeah, I think I was probably, hitting close to 300 pounds or something like that. And so at the time, I was pretty freaked out. I had a crappy doctor who really didn't explain anything to me. I basically left very, very afraid of, what do I do? And so, of course, the first thing was, get all of my Christian friends and all of my church people to, pray about it, right? Mm-hmm. And, over time, what kind of happened was that, I had a lot of reassurances from all these people that, don't worry, God's going to take care of it for you. And I was pretty adamant about not taking medication. And part of that was also from a bit of a woo thinking because of ideas that were put into my head by a chiropractor. But I think one thing that happened that really crystallized it for me was that my best friend at the time, who was one of my kind of spiritual mentors in a way, his dad is a Anglican minister who does all kinds of he goes all over the world and does spiritual warfare and battling ley lines, all this kind of stuff that really fascinated me at the time with prophetic visions and blah, blah, blah. We were kind of Pentecostal, so you can kind of imagine. But my friend had this dream or a vision or whatever.
Hey, Ryan, I'm just going to interrupt you for just 1 second to tell our producers that I don't think the link I have is working anymore. And I don't know if there's another link to the live stream or not. I'm not sure if we are actually live.
Oh.
So anyway,
I can see us.
Okay. So maybe it's just on my end. Anyway, go ahead and continue.
Yeah. So he had this dream or vision or whatever you want to call it, where he basically said that God had told him, and he was very confident about this, that if I kind of did the work on being healthier, that God would actually heal me of the diabetes. It would be taken away. And this became a really serious, important aspect of this for me, because I was still pretty freaked out about what do I do with this? And at the same time, I did what he suggested. I started, I changed my eating habits. I started working out, and I lost about 100 pounds. And magically, my diabetes seemed to go away. At least my all of my test results went back into the normal range, as I now understand would be expected when you lose 100 pounds in a fairly short period of time. And so I kind of felt okay, I've dealt with this. And it was confirmation of that sort of prophetic whatever, where it's going to be healed. And so at that point, I kind of figured, okay, God's healed it, and it's over with now. In the back of my mind, I don't think I ever really believed that, but it was what I wanted to think. So that's kind of how I operated. And so fast forwarding to, after I ceased to be a Christian, I had found that one of the effects of this was, even after I stopped believing in the God thing, was that I still had this thing in my mind that told me that, the diabetes has been dealt with. You don't have to worry about that anymore. And I kind of figured that, as I examine it in retrospect, I can sort of recognize where I didn't really believe it, but I wanted to believe it. And so I just acted like it was true. And, of course, my doctor and whoever else had been kind of telling me, look, I mean, your numbers look good now, but they may not always, because the body works in a particular way. And, when you have diabetes, this is what happens. It's gonna catch up to you eventually. You got to be proactive about it. And of course, I just kind of ignored it. It was like, it was almost like this very intense fear of mine to not even want to know anything about it. Mm-hmm. Because at a certain point I had accepted God's dealt with it. And then that translated into, it's dealt with. And any suggestion that I should get it checked even, or that I should think about it or whatever was like, I snapped those things away very, very quickly. And it became a real actual fear of going to the doctor, actually, because I think, it was like a very cognitive dissonance thing, right? Where it's like one half of my brain knew I was going to get bad news if I went to the doctor. And the other half was like fighting with that, going, no, you don't have to worry about it. Anyway, as it's turned out, yeah, I do need to have medication because my stuff was climbing up there again. But it took years and years and, the love of a very good woman to kind of push me and go, you know what, you need to go to the doctor for me because I want you to be around for a long time. Anyway, I guess that's sort of in a nutshell what I thought I would talk about is, I'm still dealing with that fallout a little bit, but now that I think I've gotten back to the rational side of my thinking with this, I'm on the medication and things are a lot better. But it was a very weird piece of baggage that stuck with me for a long, long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is what's called magical thinking. And it sounds very derogatory, but it's actually very serious, and it can be a very serious problem. If you've ever seen my interview with Anthony, when I did my follow-up with him about where I am now, the week before I went to talk to him, I was having nightmares of me either going to hell or putting myself in a life or death situation where I could choose God and go to heaven with him when I die, or go straight to hell. And I was already an atheist at this point. I already did not, consciously believe, but the religion was so ingrained in me that I was still struggling with this thing. And I felt really guilty about stuff. And it didn't make any sense because there was nothing for me to be guilty about. I was being honest with myself and who I was. But the indoctrination that I experienced, kind of colored that and made it harder for me to do things. So what I'll say from my experience is it does get better. It has gotten better for me. I think the best way for me to have gotten it better is to involve myself in community with like-minded people who have also experienced similar backgrounds and situations. I'm fortunate to be a part of the Secular Student Alliance in my area, where I can talk to other people my age about their experiences and stuff. And if I was going to give you advice on how to deal with that, I mean, that's just the best way to do it. But as far as for other people, is this like a real thing? Is this a phenomenon that happens to people who are skeptics and have been for like 10 years and still have these kinds of thoughts? Absolutely. And we know that because lots and lots of people have reported on similar experiences. I'm sure John could maybe attest to that too.
Well, yeah, actually, I've got diabetes as well, except mine's type 1. Yeah, so I'm insulin dependent, and I'm also insulin resistant. So I'm fucked twice.
But, sorry to hear that.
But no, yeah, the magical. I agree with everything that Dan was saying here. That it's being magical thinking. And I actually did a response video to a kid who well, it wasn't a kid. There was a kid in the video, but basically it was a video that was talking about how God will heal you, and this kid had diabetes and he was on medication and everything like that. And I feel so bad for people that think that like, oh, well, if I'm just a better Christian, or if I'm, better at this or I'm better at that, it'll clear up my diabetes, instead of, actually working for it. Which, I mean, honestly, it took me a while to actually start to work to get like my diabetes in control. I actually, at the second Reason rally, I actually collapsed in my hotel room, and I vomited the entire night because I was in ketoacidosis.
Oh, yeah, that's dangerous.
Yeah, and so I almost died. And it was because my doctor wasn't prescribing me enough insulin to get me to the next appointment, So it took me a while to get my insulin in control, because with, insulin resistance, as well as being a type 1 diabetic, I mean, it's been really difficult. So, I mean, I haven't had the same. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, having educated myself about diabetes, yeah, I mean, that's obviously a really tough situation to be in. A guy that I went to elementary school with, his brother actually died because he was having a hypoglycemic episode while they were on the highway, and he jumped out of the car to run across the street to go to the gas station and get a chocolate bar, and he got hit by a car. And it's, so it's sort of a tangent, obviously, but yeah, it can be freaky.
But as far as like being tied to my previous beliefs and everything like that, for me, it was more of a light switch kind of thing when it comes to like religion, because I wasn't all that attached to it. But I definitely sympathize with everybody that was really attached to their beliefs, and they still have a lot of hard times with it, because like my biggest hurdle was getting over the, fact that I was an atheist, like getting over calling myself an atheist and being okay with not believing in God. That was my big hurdle. But I mean, I think everybody has like a big hurdle to get over whenever they're deconverting out of faith. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I definitely had a moment where I was on a walk on my lunch break where it had been a few years of me kind of deconstructing my Christianity and kind of like taking things out of it that I didn't like anymore, like, homosexual stuff and, a lot of the Old Testament I just kind of threw out because I'm like, oh my God, this is awful, Yep. And just kind of getting down to like really like, oh, I got to find the real Jesus kind of thing, right? And I found myself like starting to listen to Hutchins and the Atheist Experience and Dawkins and like being on the side of them and in debates going, oh my God, why is this other side so ridiculous? And not realizing that was the side that I was still professing to be on. And it was while I was listening to, I think a video by Qualia Soup or Theremin Trees on YouTube or whatever. And he was talking about his own, sort of transition from religion to atheism and all of the emotions that he went through. And I had this moment where I realized, I think he's talking about what I'm doing right now. And I actually stopped in my tracks and I said out loud, holy shit, I think I'm an atheist. What do I do now?
Yeah.
So going back to this, how to deal with this magical thinking. I'm not a licensed psychologist and I'm not a licensed therapist, but there are potential avenues you could look into. First of all, if you're not familiar with cognitive behavioral therapy, I would strongly recommend looking into that, especially if you're experiencing symptoms as long as you have. It might be an option to look into seeing how that therapy can be treated for you. I think one of the best things you can do right now, if you can't afford that, is seriously just like look up the Wikipedia article for magical thinking. Like be cognizant and be aware of when it's happening and try not to fall back into those compulsive behaviors if you're experiencing that. So for me, my compulsive behavior was to pray and also to kind of admit to somebody when I'm kind of having these thoughts, like we are often told in Christian circles to keep things in the light, to kind of talk about it with your peers and things like that. So rejecting these kinds of behaviors so that you don't follow through with them might be able to help. I mean, there's all kinds of other ways to go about it. But just the start would be to just be aware, be mindful, and practice mindfulness of you know, when you're experiencing these things, if you recognize on a conscious level, like, oh, this is this thought pattern that I picked up years ago and I haven't broken yet, that's going to help kind of break that cycle. It's very, very similar to what people experience with OCD tendencies. You know, like, oh, they feel like these compulsive behaviors are out of their control to some degree. And to some degree, they're right. But it starts with taking charge of what we can be in control of and working from there. And that's kind of how you have to deal with this.
Yeah, and I'm happy to say I think I'm more or less over it. Mm-hmm. You know, I every now and then I'll catch myself being a little bit like, I can let it slide a bit. But I've gotten to the point where, you know, I had to accept that, you know, having information was better than not having information. And when I got the information and realized, okay, this is telling me stuff that's not cool, then it was accepting that, okay, everything that I kind of had thought, I have to unpack that and let it be not true and accept a new reality. And when I did that and I started taking medication, then, you know, looking forward actually to going to the doctor, which was a big thing for me because I had this like weird white coat syndrome going on because of my original doctor who just freaked the shit out of me. Mm-hmm. And I have a really, really awesome doctor now and have had for years, but it was always just that, like, every time I go, I feel nervous. And it's largely because I was avoiding wanting to know things. But once I did, and I've been on a much better track for a couple of years now. But you know, now I actually feel such a sense of relief because I'm like, okay, I have a really good doctor who's watching out for me. I have medication that's protecting me from the worst of this thing, and and I can go and see what my numbers are, and they're good now. Mm-hmm. And I actually know why they're good. It's not just hopefully they're good this time. Hopefully whatever. It's honestly like I know what's doing it, and I know why, and I understand the mechanisms, and it makes it so much easier to like go through life now, not having that like little worry in the back of my mind that I have to just shove away. Now my eyes are open and it feels a lot better.
Yeah, that's so great. Isn't it wonderful to know that you're taking medicine that's based on evidence so that you can have more assurance than anybody else in knowing that it's probably going to work.